Welcome to the Indiana Football Weekly Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Indiana Football Weekly is brought to you by BetNow.eu. Make sure you go to BetNow.eu. Use the promo code TRUTH100 to get a cashback bonus on your first deposit. I am your co-host for the Indiana Football Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now I'd like to welcome in my co-host, Cole Hanna. How you doing, Cole?
You know, Mike, Indiana football is in a bowl game in October for the first time in my lifetime. So, taking that into account, I'm doing pretty well right now. You know, can't complain.
I'm like 50, and it's only like the fifth time.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate history with the football program.
Yeah. Let's start off with this. I know IU was upset because Nebraska coach Scott Frost was mad because he wanted to play more Indiana and Rutgers and less Penn State, Ohio States. Do you think that's a little overblown here?
Yeah, you know, it's obvious. Like, from Scott Frost's point of view, I think it's a rather obvious statement. Like, you'd obviously rather play teams like Indiana and Rutgers and Maryland, those kind of teams, than the cream of the crop of the Big Ten, especially you look at, you know, teams like Ohio State and Penn State, undefeated teams. Obviously, if you're a team like Nebraska where you're trying to get to 6 wins, trying to get to a bowl game, trying to build a program that obviously as storied as they are, you know, you'd want games against teams that you can beat, rather teams like Ohio State or Penn State that are obviously ahead of where Nebraska is as a program. But, you know, at the same time, you got to appreciate Tom Allen trying to find things to encourage his team. And obviously a lot of guys bought into that. You look at Walt Phillier and his comments after the game, you know, it rubbed a lot of Indiana players the wrong way, and they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to listen to it. And it was a motivating factor. And obviously, you know, you look at the game Walt Phillier had, you know, it did apparently a pretty solid job of motivating him to be, you know, the best version of him he can be. So, you know, I do think it's an obvious statement. It's something I think anyone in the Big Ten saying, I would rather play Indiana, Rutgers, and Maryland than Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. I mean, that's just anyone with any kind of common sense is obviously going to believe that, you know, they have better chances of winning those games than against the cream of the crop in the Big Ten. But at the same time, if, you know, Indiana used it as motivation, and obviously it works. So, you know, can't really fault them for doing that.
Yeah, it's stupid, but it's brilliant to use, if you know what I mean, because it's obvious you would rather play Rutgers than play Ohio State. Let's look at this game, because the other thing that stood out to me is IU definitely is there a quarterback controversy at all? If Penix comes back now, Peyton Ramsey, 27 for 40, 351, 2 touchdowns. He can't play much better than what he played.
Yeah, no, you know, I definitely think, first off, hats off to Peyton Ramsey. Like you said, you really, even if you had Michael Penix in there, really any quarterback across the country, it's tough to imagine putting together a better game than what he did against Nebraska. I mean, he was hitting on all cylinders, and the offense was working all game long. You know, and early on in that game, you know, Nebraska jumped out to a 14-3 lead. It looked like this could be a blowout, but that offense really caught fire. And a lot of that's due to Peyton Ramsey, what he was able to do with his arms as well with his legs in this one. So, you know, hats off to him. He played an absolutely outstanding game. That being said, you know, I don't think they have a quarterback controversy here. And Tom Allen, you know, essentially stated that himself, that when Penix is healthy, he's our starter. And I believe that's the right decision. I think the arm talent between the two players is just completely different. I think Penix just has not only, you know, a Big Ten caliber arm, but also a potential NFL caliber arm down the stretch. And I think, you know, when Penix has played, he's played very, very well. When he's been on the field, there's been no reason to ever go against, you know, to go with a different guy. He's played about as well as you can expect him to play when he's played. So to have him lose the job due to an injury would be tough. And I think just long term, you know, Michael Penix is going to be the quarterback of the future. And it's good that you have two guys in Ramsey and Penix right now who can come in, and you can count on either one of them coming in and playing at a high level. But I just think Penix's arm opens up a lot more with the offense. And, you know, especially when you start to play tougher defenses and the windows you're throwing in are a little bit tighter than maybe they are against a team like Nebraska, I think that just extra arm strength that Penix offers you is going to be important. But, you know, that's not to understate what Ramsey did. He had an absolutely fantastic game. And when you have a quarterback with health issues like Penix has, you never know. You know, if he does get back, unfortunately, there's going to be questions, okay, well, can he stay healthy this time? Because essentially he really hasn't been able to put together more than a couple games at a time. So it's really, really, you know, good that Indiana has a guy like Peyton Ramsey waiting in the wings that can come in and play with a high level, you know, if anything ever happens to Penix.
Well, with old Whopper Filior, it's easy to play quarterback. 14 catches,
Yeah.
178 yards. My only concern about this is possibly the run blocking or the lack of commitment to running the ball. Stevie Scott 16 carries for 68 yards, which is not a bad day, but you're getting ready to play Penn State and Michigan here. You're going to have to be able to run the ball at some point.
Yeah, and even a team like Northwestern has a very, very good defense and a good front seven. So, running the football we've seen has been tough for Indiana at times, and they definitely try to use, that quick passing game, the screens, to almost serving as an extension of that running game. And that's, one thing Kalen DeBoer has done all season long is he's been committed to that passing game. He's not going to force anything in the run game, or even sometimes when it looks like you have some stuff in the run game, he doesn't usually just rely on the running game, even if it, common sense might say that's what you should do. And I'm thinking back to that Rutgers game when Stevie Scott had 164 yards but just had 12 carries in the ball game. So he obviously wants to be a pass-first football team, and that's what he wants to do. And, he'll obviously run the ball when he needs to, but that short passing game, the screen game, is really going to be an extension of the running game for Indiana, I think, in a lot of ways. But definitely Watt Filior, the season he's had is just absolutely phenomenal. Leads the Big Ten in both yards and receptions. He's been a go-to guy for both Penix and Ramsey. And it just seemed like, especially against Nebraska, there were just several big situations where you had third downs or even a fourth down, and you had, a guy needed to get open down the field, and it was none other than Watt Filior. 8 first down receptions in that game. He was all over the field. You had several Nebraska players talking a whole lot of trash to Watt, but I'm not sure what they were exactly saying because they couldn't cover him all game long, but he ended up getting a personal foul penalty as a result. So obviously, they got something out of it, but he was absolutely phenomenal. And like I mentioned earlier, he was one of those guys that was very, very vocal, about being offended by what the comments supposedly made by Scott Frost and the perceived lack of respect for Indiana's football program. And I think it seemed pretty obvious he was using that as motivation all week long, and he had a chip on his shoulder when he went out to play Nebraska. So, he's been very, very good all year long, and when he gets the ball in space, man, he's a special, special player. And I think he's going to be one of the big, big weapons for Indiana moving forward. They're going to try to get him the ball in space in any situation they can and let him do what he does best.
Yeah, and I'd say the feeling is mutual probably when Nebraska beats Indiana in basketball.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Same thing. My biggest takeaway from this game is something we brought up last week, how Tom Allen has, since he got here as a defensive coordinator in 2016, has looked for a team that can take the ball away. They did it against Maryland, and now they had some big takeaways in this game too, which I think made the difference. The third turnover, which came early in the fourth quarter, helped IU create a 2-score cushion. So even though the defense is not playing great, if you could take the ball away a few times, it can make up for that.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Indiana got some. And let's give credit. Nebraska was moving the ball very, very well in Indiana. They had over 500 yards of total offense. But, the Indiana defense just seemed to get timely stops, turnover on downs, fumbles, and especially the one with Jamar Johnson where he got the sack on Vedral. And Alan Stallings picked up the ball. Probably should have had a touchdown if Jamar Johnson blocked for him, but Vedral was able to catch up. Didn't matter. Indiana scored in the very next play. But, that's exactly how I describe the defense. Is they just made timely plays. It was definitely a bend but don't break defense. And, Nebraska definitely had success on offense. They scored 31 points. Like I've said, over 500 yards of offense. But when that Indiana defense needed to come up with a stop, they were definitely able to get it. The turnovers is a big part of what Tom Allen wants to do at Indiana. They're just such momentum shifts. You go back to the Alan Stallings fumble recovery and run. That was a complete momentum shift in the game. It looked like Indiana's defense had no chance of stopping Nebraska. The offense looked like they're going to have to score nearly every possession just to keep up. Then all of a sudden you get a big turnover, and now you're looking in good shape, and you're kind of in control of the game, a game that you feel like you've been being outplayed in so far, but all of a sudden you have the lead. So they're just huge momentum shifts, and even if you're giving up a lot of yards, all it takes is one turnover, and the game's completely changed. So it's obvious why Tom Allen has prioritized that aspect defensively. And they've struggled at getting turnovers at times, but the last couple weeks, really, they've gotten big turnovers when they needed to get them. And I think it's a big reason why Indiana's been able to win back-to-back Big Ten road games.
All right, so let's go here because I know Ken Sterling, our friend from the Indiana Basketball Weekly show, brought up how he was apologizing to Tom Allen. I'm not going to go that far yet because still we've beaten teams that are 500 Big Ten teams. To me, there's still no defining win. The defining win is beating Penn State or Michigan, which is left on your schedule. Am I wrong here?
No, I mean, I think you're obviously, credit to Tom Allen for what he's done this season. They have 6 wins. They're bowl eligible in October for the first time since 1993. But we also need to be honest, even with the wins he's racked up this season, he's won 1 game as an underdog in his Big Ten career. 1 game. And that was against Nebraska. And Nebraska's obviously not some, like you said, program-changing win or that breakthrough win. And it's
not Tom Osborne's Nebraska.
No, it's a breakthrough win in the sense that, you're really kind of thinking, okay, we can have a special season. We have 6 wins in October. It's a breakthrough win in that sense, in that it's a Big Ten road win, which has not been easy for Indiana to get traditionally, no matter who they play. But it's not a game-changing win. You've got games coming up against Penn State, against Michigan, top 25 teams that, if you beat who you need to and then, steal one of those games, you're looking at a 9-win season. And then I think it's very fair to say,
yeah,
okay, I'm sorry to Tom Allen because he's obviously changed this program and he has them on the right track. Obviously they're underdogs to Nebraska, but I still feel for the most part the teams they've beaten are not as good as Indiana is as a football team. Indiana's beat every team that they should beat on paper. That
I disagree. I think they should have beaten Michigan State.
Okay, yeah, that's Michigan State, especially with the struggles they've had. Well, I'm sure even if you go back and look at that game, I mean, there's just a couple plays there that, you wish you had back and they should have won that game. But I definitely agree. But when you look at wins like Nebraska, Maryland, even though they're Big Ten road wins and where they've gotten you in the season at 6-2, they're huge wins. But I still think, if you play those teams on a neutral site, Indiana's going to be the favored team, and Indiana should win those games. So I don't feel like there's a big wins in the sense that they beat better teams. It's just big wins for what they need for the season.
It's how many wins they have and what month this is.
Exactly.
So now they project, from what I look at it, playing in and I know when I was a kid, I always dreamed about playing in this game, the Red Box Bowl in Santa Clara against Arizona State. But if you beat a Penn State or a Michigan, maybe all of a sudden you're January the 1st playing the Citrus Bowl.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's definitely an opportunity. I mean, Indiana has a chance to put together a really, really solid season. But you've got to beat a team like Penn State. You've got to beat a team like Michigan. You need to get that top 25 signature win on your resume, and then you can really be thinking of a special season. I think when you look at when they play those two teams, like, when you look at Penn State, when they play them, Penn State, that's sandwiched in between road games against Minnesota and a road game at Ohio State following the Indiana game. Indiana's in between those two games, so you're looking at, that's a great situation to be in, to have a bit of a trap game for Indiana there against Penn State. And it's a similar situation with Michigan. When you look at Michigan's schedule, the week before they play Indiana, they're home to Michigan State, and that's a big rivalry game for them. Then they're at Indiana, and then the following week, they're playing Ohio State, another big rivalry game that everyone looks forward to at Michigan at the end of the year. So the placement of where Indiana plays and when Indiana plays those teams is really, really convenient, I think, to be a bit of a trap game, and Indiana has an opportunity to play spoiler there. Going to Penn State is probably a bit of a long shot to imagine a victory there. And I know Michigan's looked better of late, but I think Michigan's a team Indiana has at least recently played very, very well against and has come incredibly close to beating them. Just haven't been able to get over that hump. But this season with the team Indiana has, and I think the talent they have in terms of being able to open up the game passing-wise and really break open the game with, Penix's arm talent and Watt failure, I think they can move the ball and have some success in that Michigan defense. And that Michigan offense I don't think is too impressive. Obviously, they look good against Notre Dame. But for the most part, that Michigan offense has not really blown anyone away. So, I think a home game against Michigan, I think Indiana has a legitimate shot there.
All right, so let's go ahead and look at what's coming up this Saturday night as Indiana hosts Northwestern. Number one, is there going to be a crowd there?
Is there going to be? It's going to be a tough question because you've got all the built-in excuses of, oh, it's going to be cold, it's going to be at night, it's going to be 28, 29 degrees, and I don't know if I want to sit through all that. But at the end of the day, there's no reason it should not be filled. I mean, you've got the first night game in November in Indiana football history, essentially, which is absolutely incredible. The team is 6-2. They've seemed to turn a corner. There's no reason at this point not to support this football team. I know there's always been that perception of, oh, it's Indiana football. I'm not going to pay to watch that product they put on the field. They're going to lose. Traditionally when Indiana gets to the Big Ten play, that's when the losses start racking up. But this Indiana football team is different. I mean, they're 6-2. They haven't had a season like this. They haven't been at this point in October since 1993. There's no excuse for this stadium to not be 90% full, if not a sellout.
And,
I know.
Go ahead.
I know Indiana has a negative perception of when you've been as bad as Indiana has historically, you've got to prove you aren't that anymore. And 6 wins is not going to prove that. They still have a lot more they can accomplish this season, but they need fan support, and especially not just for what they do on the field, but especially for what they do recruiting wise. And Tom Allen said after that Nebraska game, we're 6-2. I feel validated a little bit in what I'm doing, that I have this program on the right track, and I'm going to go call recruits and say, look at what we're doing here. Look at what we're building. We're going to have this breakthrough season I've been telling you is going to come. And if I'm a recruit and I see okay, they think they're really turning a corner, they have a big night game, a chance to be 7-2, and all of a sudden the stadium's half full like it usually is, that as a football recruit would be incredibly unattractive to me. So I think the football team is doing their part. They're having this breakthrough season, and they have a chance to really rack up a whole lot of wins for Indiana football. Now it's time for the fans to do their part and start showing some support for this football team.
All right, so when we look at Northwestern, I think there are some issues here that could make this a tougher game than what people think. The Northwestern defense is probably a top 3 defense in the Big Ten, nowhere near Ohio State, but they are really good, and the thing that worries me here is they're terrific against the better passing teams. They've allowed just 180 yards per game, and that's Indiana's strength. The Hoosiers are leading the Big Ten in passing, but the Wildcats are able to keep everything locked up. They don't give up a slew of yards after the catch either. They tackle really well. Coach Fitzgerald there does a great job with that defense. They tackle well, and the problem has been the offense this year. So to pull this off, I think Northwestern, as we talked about takeaways before, has to win the turnover battle, and they've been struggling. They've given the ball up a lot this year, but IU, up until the last 2 weeks, hasn't taken it away. So I would think for Northwestern to win this game, what they need to do is to play the defense they normally play, cause 2 or 3 turnovers, and have an undisciplined, unfocused Indiana team that is full of themselves come out and maybe throw up 9, 10 penalties in this game, and then I think they would have a chance.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I agree with everything you just said there, especially when you look at what you said about the yards after the catch and how Indiana loves to do that short passing game and get guys in space to get a lot of yards after the catch. It's going to be a battle. It's going to be strength against strength, and Northwestern's very good at taking away yards after the catch, and Indiana's very good at prioritizing and finding ways to get yards after the catch. And credit to your, like you said, they're a very good defensive team. SP Plus, which is essentially a statistical rating of, how teams stack up in various ways, has Northwestern as the 13th best defensive team in all of college football. So they've been a very, very good defensive team all season long. And when you start, so I know record-wise, they don't look great. They're 1-6, probably going to miss a bowl game. They're in a huge turnaround here at the end of the season. But when you start to look at the teams they've had to play, their losses in the Big Ten are to Ohio State, Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Michigan State. So they haven't had the easiest go at it. Now, obviously, you look at, losses against like Nebraska, where Indiana just beat. So Indiana should take care of this game. It's at home for Indiana. This will be. There's some areas of concern here for this game. Definitely, the stuff you just outlined. But at the end of the day, it would be a bad loss for Indiana to take here, considering where they're building this program and at 6-2. But, I think Pat Fitzgerald's a very, very good coach. He's had this is the defending Big Ten West champions here. So definitely no reason for Indiana to take this team lightly or, like you said, kind of come in off a high after a couple emotional wins against Maryland and Nebraska. They've got to be ready to play this game. And, it's not going to be easy. They're going to have to find ways to move the ball on this defense. I think a guy like Penix can really be helpful here, because I worry when you have Ramsey, I think it's definitely a lot of yards after the catch. We saw it against Nebraska. There's not as much vertical passing and down the field passing, but when you go to a guy like Penix who has such a strong arm, he can really add in a few different wrinkles and really push the ball deep, deep down the field. And when you have guys like Wap with the ability to change directions quickly and get in and out of cuts, I think that's something they can take advantage of here if, maybe the yards after the catch in the short passing game isn't working as well. And definitely I think you would like to see them run the football. Indiana's been better at running the football recently, but this front seven for Nebraska or for Northwestern is very, very good as well. So they're going to have their hands full. The offensive line has played better run blocking the last few weeks, but they're going to have their hands full against Northwestern. It's going to be their toughest test of the season, probably since Ohio State, I would say, in terms of front seven run blocking that they've had to deal with. So, the offensive line has played better, but Northwestern's going to be a different beast in the last few weeks here.
Yeah, and Northwestern offensively, dead last in the country, averaging 10.7 points per game, scoring 10 or fewer 5 times in 7 games. Hoosier defense allows 324 yards per game. IU normally dominates the time of possession battle. The only way this works for Northwestern is to keep its offense on the field and go for a few long, sustained drives. I doubt that's going to happen, though. Their passing game is – they don't have one. I mean, their completion percentage is under 50%, and they average 4.1 yards per throw with 2 touchdowns on the year. I mean, this is a team, though, that went to Iowa, and I think Iowa beat them 20-0, which I think may be something like what we're looking at here, only I don't think IU's defense is as good as Iowa. When I look at this game, I think something like 30-10, 30-13 Indiana.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good bet. And just like you said, they've only had, 2 passing touchdowns all year long. Both the quarterback, they've really kind of used a 2-quarterback system, Aiden Smith, Hunter Johnson. Both of those guys were below 50% in completion percentage. And, like you said, the 2 touchdowns, in comparison to that, they have 10 interceptions on the year. So it's not been a great touchdown-to-interception ratio for them all year long. They've been quite frankly, a horrible passing team for the majority of the season. So I don't think Indiana's defense is as good as Iowa, but I think if Northwestern starts to have some success offensively here, that's a major cause for concern for Indiana's defense, because this passing game is really, really not that good. So they definitely should be able to dominate this game defensively, keep the offense off the field. I think, like you said, don't let Northwestern kind of dominate this game and take control of the game and the flow offensively. As long as they do that, they should be fine. I think Indiana will have some success offensively, but Northwestern is going to make it tough on them. I think Northwestern will get on the board, maybe a couple field goals, but I'll go Indiana wins 24-6.
Yeah, because when you look at Northwestern, the only game they've scored more than 15 points was against a really bad UNLV team that they only beat 30-14. They have played some tougher competition, but Stanford, I think, is down this year. Stanford beat them 17-7. Michigan State beats them 31-10. They did play Wisconsin tough at Wisconsin, but that doesn't look as impressive since the way Wisconsin's looked the last couple weeks. But then again, losing 38-0 to Ohio State's probably closer than most teams would get. And then they went to Lincoln, only lost 13-10 to Nebraska. So this is a team defensively that can keep the game close. But I look for Indiana to prevail here, and then we will talk about Penn State next.
Yep. Should be a fun stretch for Indiana. They've taken care of the wins they needed to get. They still have Northwestern left to cap off that important 4-game stretch. And then I think, we're going to get into that stretch where Tom Allen has a chance to really rack up that program-changing victory. So we'll see what they can do. It's going to be fortunately, it's fun to talk about Indiana football in October and not be trying to rack up, okay, when are we going to get win number 6, and probably pointing to that Purdue game at the end of the year. Not really used to this. Don't know how to process this.
Yeah, it is weird. I haven't seen it since the 90s. Back then I had hair.
Everything was different back then.
Everything was different. The
It's,
music was a lot better too. Because I mean, until
yeah,
you've ridden in your Dodge Daytona and listened to White Snake, "Here I Go Again," you've not really lived.
yeah. I don't know a whole lot about that. I can't comment on that. I guess
Have
I
you ever
haven't
even
I've
heard
never
of
known.
White Snake?
I don't think so. I don't. Maybe if I heard it, I would know. But off the name
You've
alone,
never
I
heard
don't
"Here
think
I
so.
Go Again" on my own, going down the only road I've ever known? I would sing it, but then everybody will get jealous about my beautiful singing voice.
That's fair. We should probably hold it. We don't want to don't want to upset anyone.
Yeah, because people will just get jealous. It's not that they'd be upset.
It's-
It's just they'd be ashamed that they
right,
don't have
yeah.
the same kind of
It's
dulcet tones that I do. I don't even know what
a little bit of
dulcet
envy
means,
there.
but I heard somebody talk about it once, and it seemed like it fit right there. Um, all right, next week we'll have a special guest. We'll have Kent Sterling, who's been around Indiana sports for a little while, will be on the show with us to talk about Indiana, hopefully dismantling Northwestern 52-0, which means they beat them worse than what Ohio State did. But we will be back next week. Don't know the time yet. Keep an eye out on our Twitter page at Grueling Truth. Cole, you can find Cole Hanna at Cole Hanna5, correct, Cole, on Twitter?
Correct. Yeah.
All right, guys, so we're going to wrap it up. Make sure you check him out on the Indianapolis Colts Weekly Show if you're a Colts fan, too, which was posted on thegruelingtruth.com last night. The opening got screwed up, but the rest of the show's probably all right. All right, guys, you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you find podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Cole Hanna, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.